The night before my wedding, my dad slept with my fiancée. Not a rumor. Not a we were drunk mistake. I watched the timestamps. I saw her slip in through the side door and leave at dawn with her hair undone and her coat in her hands. The next day I still put on the tux, still walked down the aisle like nothing was wrong because I wanted them to believe they'd won. Then the pastor asked if I took her for better or worse. I took the mic, turned to the crowd, and said the one sentence you're never supposed to say in a church. 200 people went dead silent. My father stood up like he could preach his way out of it. And my fiancée? She smiled like she thought I'd stay quiet. I'm Caspian Hart, and I'm about to tell you what really happened. But before I do, can you say hi in the comments or tell me where you're watching from? Sometimes just knowing someone is there makes a story feel less heavy to carry. If you've ever been betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you, consider subscribing because this channel is where we turn pain into truth and truth into freedom. Thank you. And now, let me tell you everything. I've always believed that words can shape the world. That if you choose the right ones, if you say them at the right time, you can hold things together, marriages, families, futures. I believed that right up until the week before my wedding when I realized words could also be used to control, to erase, to manipulate. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Caspian Hart. I'm 30. Senior editor at Pine and Fjord Publishing in Portland, Oregon. A job that sounds more glamorous than it is, but gives me a kind of purpose. Most days I shape other people's truths for a living. Memoirs, essays, stories that try to make sense of the chaos. The irony's not lost on me. I grew up in the shadow of my father, Reverend Gideon Hart. He wasn't just a pastor, he was the pastor. The kind who delivered sermons like stage plays. People said he didn't just preach, he performed faith. Church wasn't a building, it was him, his voice, his eyes, his rules. Everything about our family revolved around how things looked from the pews. My fiancée at the time was Serafina Knox. Sarah to most people, but somehow I always felt like I had to say the full name, like shortening it would cheapen her. She was brilliant in a way that cut. A corporate attorney with a face that belonged on campaign posters and a mind that could carve holes in your logic without raising her voice. Her family came from old Portland money. Judge Alaric Knox and Dr. Lenora Knox, her father, presided over half the high-profile court cases in the city, her mother a renowned oncologist. Their name opened doors. Our wedding, it wasn't just a celebration, it was an alignment of dynasties. We were set to marry at the Cathedral of St. Elowen. High arches, stained glass, a long aisle built for stories, 200 guests, half the legal and ecclesiastical elite of Oregon. It was going to be a social event, not just a sacred one. But I didn't mind. Not then. I thought it meant something that my life had arrived somewhere solid. The morning this whole thing really started unraveling, I was at work reading the galley of a memoir from a man who'd survived infidelity, bankruptcy, and a near-death experience. I was halfway through a paragraph about betrayal when Orion, my assistant, knocked gently and reminded me we had the sound check at the cathedral at 3, the seating chart walkthrough at 5, and the final contract meeting with the videographer after that. It didn't feel like too much, it felt like momentum. I told Orion to move the seating chart meeting to the next day. I wanted time to write my vows. I'd been working on them in my head for weeks. Not just the typical for better or worse, but something real. Something that would tell Sarah who I was beyond the tuxedo and the family name. Later that evening, I found myself at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall, the same place I'd proposed to her. It had been after a chamber orchestra performance. I dropped to one knee under that gold-draped stage, held out the ring in a moment that felt like it came straight from a film, and she'd said yes with tears in her eyes. Afterward, we'd had a small toast at my father's house. Just the families. My father made a speech, not "I'm happy for my son," but "my son made the right choice." This is the kind of union that honors God. It was all about alignment and order and image. I brushed it off. He was a pastor. That's how he spoke. In scriptures and judgments. The next time both families met to finalize the wedding logistics, I started noticing how well Sarah and my dad seemed to click. Not in a flirty way, not then, but in a strange, synchronized language of control. They talked about symmetry in the table arrangements, tone in the flower palettes, reverence in the ceremony. They didn't overlap. They aligned. Like two people playing from the same sheet music. At one point, I brought up the idea of writing our own vows, something personal, just a short addition to the traditional lines. Sarah smiled tightly and said, "Let's think about it. I don't want it to feel messy." My dad nodded, added, "Some traditions exist for a reason, Caspian. This cathedral wasn't built for freestyle promises. It stuck with me. The way they both pushed back, not harshly but with the same argument, like they'd already discussed it. Still, I told myself not to overthink, that maybe I was just too deep into editing other people's stories and now imagining subtext in my own. Before we left that night, my dad pulled me aside in the vestibule of the church, his voice low, not a whisper but heavy. "There are things in life, Caspian," he said, "that should stay within their structure. When we tamper with the sacred, we risk making it ordinary." I smiled, nodded, but something about the way he looked at me, like he was warning me, not guiding me, left a taste in my mouth I couldn't place. The week before the wedding was a machine I couldn't slow down. Every hour was accounted for, every call logged, every detail reviewed, except the ones that really mattered. The rehearsal at St. Alowan started out fine. Pastor Merritt Waller was an older man with a steady voice and a calm presence, exactly the kind of anchor a chaos-prone ceremony needed. We walked through the readings, the lighting, the seating of parents. My dad was in the front pew taking mental notes like he was directing a play he'd already staged before. When we got to the vows, Merritt paused. "We'll use the traditional form, yes?" he asked. I blinked. "I'd like to add something personal," I said. "A short part. Just a few lines." He frowned slightly. "Your father mentioned you preferred the standard format." I laughed. "No, that must be a mistake." Merritt didn't push, but his eyes said enough. He'd already been briefed. Not by me. Later, Orion and I reviewed the final email list for the ceremony programs. He flagged a few updates, edits to email addresses, some guest notes changed. Said the wedding planner had passed along requests from your father's side. Wait, I said, what kind of changes? Mostly formatting. But a couple people were moved to back pew status. I didn't know what that meant, but it sounded like political rearranging. And it wasn't mine. Back at home, I logged into our shared wedding expense account to review the payments. I wasn't trying to micromanage. I just needed something to focus on. That's when I saw it. A rush order placed 2 days earlier. A bottle of Cheval Blanc, 98. Price $1,350. Delivery address, Hart Residence. Recipient S. Knox. Sarah had never ordered wine to my father's house, especially not wine he once claimed in a sermon was what heaven must taste like. I asked her about it that night casually while she changed in our room. She said it was a surprise thank you gift for my dad's help with the ceremony. She smiled like she meant it. But she didn't meet my eyes. That's when the email arrived. No subject line, no signature, just one sentence. If you plan to write your own vows, check who's most afraid of hearing the truth. I read it 3 times. It wasn't a warning. It was a dare. The message included a list. Nothing definitive, but it referenced late-night counseling sessions at my father's house, mentioned a perfume that doesn't belong to your mother, and 2 wine glasses, one always in the sink, never both. My spine went cold. I stared at the ceiling most of that night. Around midnight, I called Sarah and asked where she was. She said she was still at the firm last-minute prep for a client merger. Her voice was flat, practiced. 10 minutes later, my father texted, "Don't swing by tonight. Hosting a few church elders. Long meeting. The timing. The tone. The too easy symmetry of both excuses." It clicked too neatly. I didn't reply to either of them. Instead, I made a plan. Tomorrow I'd go to my father's house. No warning. No calls. I needed to see something, anything that would tell me I was paranoid. But deep down, I already knew. If that email was real, if those details were true, then what was broken wasn't just my wedding. It was every Sunday sermon, every righteous word, every proud look my father had ever given me. And that meant I wasn't just a groom. I was a witness. And the truth was about to testify. I pulled into my father's driveway just before dusk, the last threads of daylight catching on the porch railing like spider silk. The Hart House was the same craftsman-style home I'd grown up in, wooden beams, symmetrical windows, a porch swing that creaked with every breeze, but it felt different. Not in a way I could name, not at first. Just a shift. Like someone had moved the furniture a half inch in every direction, just enough to make your body lean the wrong way when you walked through it. I didn't text, didn't knock. I used the side key from under the planter box, the one he always swore was just for emergencies. The front door gave with a soft click. The smell hit me first. My father's house always smelled like old wood-pipe tobacco, and the faint trace of black tea he steeped every afternoon whether he drank it or not. But today it was something else, crisp, sharp, unmistakably floral. Not sweet, not musky. Something expensive, clean, feminine. It hung in the air like a presence. I stepped into the kitchen expecting the usual low lighting and a mug half filled with cold tea near the sink. Instead, everything was too clean. The granite counters wiped down to a streakless shine, the wooden floor too glossy, the sink empty, save for a single wine glass still beaded with moisture. Another sat drying on the dish rack, perfectly balanced on its stem like it had been washed in a hurry and forgotten mid-dry. The corkscrew was out. Right-handed placement. Same as my father. A half-closed bottle of red sat beside it, Cheval Blanc, 98. I recognized the label before I even saw it fully. It was the same one from the expense account. I ran a hand along the back of one of the bar stools. Everything looked staged, intimate but careful. And then I saw it. On the ledge by the wine rack, half hidden behind a framed quote about grace and forgiveness, lay a silver hair clip, thin minimalist, the kind Sarah used to wear when she tied her hair back during trial prep. My mother didn't wear clips like that. Hell, my mother hadn't lived in this house since I was 22. Footsteps behind me. I turned. My father stood at the kitchen doorway, sleeves rolled up, collar slightly loosened. He smiled like he hadn't caught me rifling through a crime scene. "Caspian," he said calmly. "What a surprise." "I needed to grab some papers," I said. "Wedding stuff. You weren't answering your phone." He stepped in, poured water into the kettle like nothing was wrong. I gave all the materials to the planner. "You should have checked with her." I didn't move. "Was someone here?" He paused for a split second too long, then shrugged. "A few folks from the church board, just quick chats. They've gone." I glanced at the glasses again. Did they all drink Cheval Blanc? One corner of his mouth tugged up. One of them had a toast before leaving. "I haven't cleaned up yet." His answers were too polished. Not defensive, not evasive. Just practiced. I opened the trash cabinet beneath the sink slowly, deliberately. He didn't stop me. A crumpled receipt sat near the top. Wine delivery, recipient S. Knox. Time stamped exactly during the window when Sarah had told me she was in a client meeting. My fingers tightened around the paper. I stood turned, dialed her number without breaking eye contact with my father. She picked up after 2 rings, slightly breathless. "Hey, babe. Still at the office." "What's up?" I kept my voice level. "Did you stop by my dad's house today?" A beat of silence. Not long, just enough. Then a light laugh. "No." "Why?" "That's a weird question." "I'm here now." Another pause. My father looked at me. His eyes for the first time didn't look pastoral. They looked dark, alive in a way that made my chest tighten. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be," he said, voice low. "You need to be careful what stories you tell yourself, Caspian." I left without saying goodbye. Back in my car, the crumpled receipt burned a hole in my pocket. The perfume still clung to my collar, and something cold had settled in my gut. It wasn't just doubt anymore. It was fact. They were lying. I drove home with one thought looping through my head. If they were that careful to erase 12 minutes of the truth, what else had they built this entire marriage on? That night I logged into the family's shared security system. The camera feed from my father's house loaded slowly. I sat on my living room couch, lights off screen glaring into the dark. The shared login had been his idea years ago, some grand statement about transparency within the home. I'd never thought twice about it. Until now. I filtered the date and time according to the receipt. There she was. Serafina, my fiancée. Walking up the path to my father's house, coat tight around her hair, pulled back a beanie low on her forehead. She paused at the door, glanced over her shoulder, then entered through the side entrance like she'd done it 100 times before. My mouth went dry, but 12 minutes in the screen flickered, froze, pixelated. No signal. When it returned, she was gone. I rewound again, played it in slow motion. The glitch was clean. Too clean. It didn't look like a camera error. It looked like someone had known exactly what they were doing. I opened the location tracking app. It was still active on all family phones left over from when my dad insisted on a shared system for safety. Her phone pinged downtown for 10 minutes during the same time window, then snapped back to my father's address. It didn't make sense, unless she or someone else had manually updated the location to create an alibi. I checked the timestamp. Location manually refreshed. It wasn't an accident. It was deliberate. I drove to the office. Orion was still there. He always worked late, always had earbuds in and a spreadsheet open. I told him I needed to confirm the final guest list file before we sent it to print. A half-truth. Sure, he said, pulling it up. Weird thing, though, there was a duplicate login earlier this week. Someone downloaded the spreadsheet remotely, not from our office IP. Where from? He clicked into the log. Residential. Southeast Portland. Near your dad's address. What was the user? Eloan admin. Weird name, right? But the access request came through Serafina's email. She said it was on behalf of your dad. My heart thudded in my ears. She wasn't just showing up. She was helping run the show, the seating the guests, the flow of the ceremony. Every lever of control passed quietly between the two of them while I played the groom with the blindfold. I excused myself, said I needed air, and stepped outside. Called the wedding planner. I kept it casual, asked who made the final decision on the vow format. She hesitated. Officially Reverend Gideon. But Serafina also emphasized keeping it traditional. She said it minimized risk. Risk of what? She laughed nervously. I'm not sure. Just wedding stuff. No, it wasn't wedding stuff, it was fear. They weren't worried I'd ruin the ceremony. They were worried I'd speak a truth that would ruin them. I texted Sarah to meet for coffee the next morning. Neutral ground, somewhere public. When she walked in, she was flawless as always. Power heels, perfect coat. Under-eye concealer that almost hid the exhaustion. We ordered. Sat. I didn't bring up the footage, or the receipt, or the wine. Been going by my dad's place a lot lately, I asked casually. She smiled, nodded. Just helping him finalize the church details. He likes things. Precise. And that afternoon 2 days ago, you were there. She blinked. No, I haven't been since last week. Why, I watched her face. Not a twitch. Not a shift. She lied like she breathed. Effortlessly. We finished our drinks. She stood, adjusted her sleeve, and that's when I saw it. A faint mark. Red. Just below her wrist. Like a thumb had gripped her hard or she'd brushed against something sharp. She noticed me noticing. Tugged the sleeve down instantly. Didn't say a word. I walked her to the door, kissed her cheek, smiled, then went straight home. Back to the footage. I slowed the playback to half speed. Watched again the moment just before the camera glitched. And there he was. A figure moving down the hall. Broad shoulders, confident stride, hand reaching toward the router cabinet. It was him. My father. I closed the laptop. No more questions. No more polite confrontations. They'd rehearsed their lies too well. I couldn't compete with rehearsed. I needed proof. Undeniable. Public. Sharp enough to cut through 200 people's silence. This wasn't a wedding anymore. It was a stage. And I was finally ready to take the mic. 2 days before the wedding, my father asked to meet at the cathedral. He said it was a father-son check-in, nothing formal. Just a quick talk in his office behind the sacristy, where they stored old ceremony books and archived wedding scripts. I arrived before sunset. The church was empty, its stained glass casting gold and violet patches across the aisles. His office was small bookshelves crowding the walls, a large desk covered in paperwork and devotional pamphlets. The air smelled faintly of incense and aged wood. He greeted me with his usual warmth, offering coffee. There were 2 cups on the desk, one black, his style, the other had oat milk. My father hated oat milk, said it was modern nonsense. That cup wasn't his. I know these last few days are overwhelming, he said, sipping from the black coffee. But I need you to trust in the path laid out for you. Doubt is natural before something sacred. It doesn't mean the commitment is wrong. His voice was gentle, rehearsed like one of his Sunday sermons. I barely listened. My eyes scanned the room. On the edge of the bookshelf, tucked beside a worn Bible, I saw a silver hair clip. Same minimalist style as the one I found in his kitchen. And beside it a small perfume atomizer. White glass. No label. But I knew that scent. It was the one that clung to his house the night I found the wine. I didn't touch them. I just remembered. He stepped out to take a call. I told him I'd stay and look through the ceremonial script for the wedding. The moment the door clicked shut, I opened the side cabinet. Inside was a thick folder labeled Pre-Marital Counseling C. Hart and S. Knox. I flipped it open. The first few pages were standard notes about communication expectations, shared values. But then I found sections written entirely in his handwriting. Entire pages detailing private sessions with Serafina. Paragraphs about her anxieties, doubts about intimacy, and how she found comfort in shared faith. Several meetings took place not at the church but at my father's house. One entry described a session that extended into the evening due to emotional distress. That line was underlined, the dates repeated. Late nights, always at his home, always when I was elsewhere. My stomach nodded. These weren't professional meetings. They were cloaked in religious vocabulary, but they documented a relationship that had crossed a line physically or emotionally I couldn't yet prove. But I knew what it meant. That night, Judge Knox called. His voice was sharp, clinical. Caspian Serafina is deeply worried about your mental health. She mentioned you've become obsessive, that you're monitoring her, suggesting wild theories. She said you haven't been sleeping. I stayed silent. Have you been taking anything? Serafina said you were prescribed medication after your mother left. Is it possible you're having a reaction? It hit me like a slap. They weren't just lying, they were preparing the narrative. I was being preemptively discredited. If I exploded at the wedding, they wanted people to already believe I'd cracked under pressure. A groom unraveling from stress, not betrayal. Minutes later, I received a text from an unknown number. If you make a scene, you'll be the one ruined. Attached was a photo me at the cafe with Serafina taken from across the street. Blurry, but obvious surveillance. They weren't just lying to me. They were watching me. I logged into our joint wedding expense account. I started pulling records, hotel bills, vendor orders, transportation charges. There was a wine order for Cheval Blanc, signed on delivery by G. Hart, a boutique hotel reservation under the initials GH. The confirmation email linked to a secondary email address associated with the Cathedral Eloan admin. My pulse quickened. They had used church resources, its communication channels, its vendors, even its location as part of the cover. It wasn't just an affair. It was a coordinated effort to control everything. The ceremony, the story, the truth. I backed up every receipt, every message, every video clip, stored them on a private drive. Around midnight, Serafina texted me, "Please don't make this hard. I just want our day to be beautiful." There was no apology, no denial, just a plea to maintain the performance. She didn't care about the marriage, she cared about the image, and so I made my decision. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. I would let them believe they'd won. Let them think I'd still walk that aisle smiling like a fool. And then, I'd take the mic. The night before the wedding, Jet picked me up around 7. It was tradition best man and groom spending the night apart from the bride. One last breather before the plunge. I told everyone I was staying at the Wesleyan downtown. I even let the wedding planner book the room. But I didn't check in. Instead, I reserved a different suite at a boutique hotel across town under an alias. Only Jet knew, and I made him promise whatever happened he'd keep the location to himself. Serafina seemed almost too eager for me to go. "You should rest," she said that morning. "Get a good night's sleep. Tomorrow's going to be huge." She kissed my cheek like everything was normal. At 11:43 p.m., I opened the cathedral security feed from my hotel room. I'd hacked in the night before, routed the screen to my laptop, and set up a screen recorder. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. Nothing for 30 minutes. Then just past midnight movement. Serafina, entering from the cathedral's side door. No hesitation. She walked like she knew every step. She disappeared into the hallway near my father's office. Lights turned off one by one. A shadow passed the camera, tall, broad-shouldered. My father. I leaned in closer. He closed the main blinds, turned off the light in the entryway. The timestamp read 12:17 a.m. They were sealing the place from view. No guests, no board members, just the two of them. I fast-forwarded. Hours passed, no exits. At 6:02 a.m., Serafina reappeared, hair undone, coat in her arms, not on her shoulders. Her face looked scrubbed raw, free of her usual polish. She didn't see the camera. She walked out, glanced at her phone, and disappeared into the morning. My father followed at 6:09. He stood at the door for a few seconds, scanning the street like someone checking for witnesses. Then he closed it behind him. A minute later, my phone buzzed. A text from him. "Sleep well, Caspian. Today's your big day." I stared at the message. He wasn't hiding. He wasn't even sorry. They believed they'd buried the truth so deep I'd never find my way back to daylight. I uploaded the footage, compiled it with the logs, the receipts, the screenshots. Still, it wasn't enough. I needed witnesses. I called the security company, requested a third-party export of the motion data with tamper-proof metadata. I called the wine vendor, confirmed again the signature on the delivery. I called the hotel. "Yes, Mr. GH checked in using a church administrator account," the front desk clerk said. "Stayed 3 hours. No overnight." They were meticulous, but I had the thread, and I kept pulling. At 10:34 a.m., I got another anonymous email. "Don't let them turn you into the villain. Say it when they can't rewrite it." Attached was a PDF of the cathedral's guest list, marked with seat locations, a full map of who would be watching. It wasn't just betrayal. It was theater. I called Naira, one of our in-house videographers, told her to come to the cathedral with her gear pose as part of the wedding crew. I gave her a seat near the front camera, ready aimed at my father. Then Orion. I gave him access to a pre-drafted email written in plain terms, what they did, how I found out, and why this wedding was a lie. He'd wait for my signal. A single word. Send. Finally, I sat with Jet. When I put the mic down, I said, "I need you to walk me out. Fast. Don't stop if people try to talk. Get me to the car." He didn't ask questions, just nodded. That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and imagined their faces, my father's mask cracking Serafina's silence. Two people who built their lives on image, on control, on sermons they never believed. I wasn't going to interrupt the wedding at the usual moment. Not when the pastor asked for objections. I would wait. Wait until he looked me in the eye and said, "For better or worse." Because that's when the lie was thickest. That's when the truth would land the hardest. At 9:00 a.m., I stood before the mirror in a tailored tuxedo. I looked like the man everyone expected to see. But I wasn't him. I wasn't walking into a marriage. I was walking into judgment. Not mine. Theirs. I grabbed my keys, my phone, the flash drive, and headed toward the Cathedral of St. Elowin. The cathedral felt colder than usual, even under the soft spill of sunlight pouring through the stained glass windows. I arrived earlier than scheduled, not by accident. Jet let me in through the side entrance as we'd planned, and I moved with purpose but no haste. Calm was my weapon now. I wasn't the man they remembered. I wasn't here to celebrate. I was here to hold up a mirror. I met Naira just past the second aisle. She stood near the last pew on the right camera rig, positioned with surgical precision, her expression unreadable, but her nod told me she was ready. She would capture everything, especially the front row where he'd be. Orion had already confirmed the email draft was locked, loaded, and waiting for one word send. I didn't need to raise my voice, I just needed to be heard once. Then came the warning shot. The wedding planner pulled me aside, a clipboard clutched too tightly in her hands. Your father, she began, avoiding my eyes, has requested a slight alteration to the ceremony. Pastor Merritt will be condensing the service. He wants to minimize distractions. Distractions. Meaning me. They were scrambling, still hoping to contain me, still treating me like some unstable element they could neutralize by cutting my mic time. I looked her dead in the eye and smiled, the kind of smile that says you're welcome to try. That's fine, I told her. Whatever works best. Inside, I began shutting things down. No more emotion, no more doubt. I avoided Serafina's gaze. I didn't scan the Knox family for cues. I wasn't searching for signals anymore. I was the signal now. I caught only one moment I wasn't ready for my mother, Maris. She arrived late, eyes shaded behind sunglasses, even though we were indoors. She sat one seat away from my father deliberately. She didn't glance my way, but I saw the way her fingers twisted her wedding ring, the way her lips parted slightly when she saw me standing there like a live wire. She knew something was coming. She just didn't know what. Then the organ began. Soft, grand, hollow. The guests rose, all 200 of them. I walked down the aisle with measured steps. No smile, no glance to the crowd. Just silence. I could hear every footstep, every breath. I saw the way the light hit Serafina's dress, how carefully she held herself, every angle rehearsed, every eyelash deliberate. My father sat in the front row, hands folded neatly as if he were just another proud parent, not a man hiding in plain sight. Pastor Merritt began the ceremony. His voice echoed slightly, as it always did in that vaulted space. He moved quickly as requested, trying to shepherd us toward the vow exchange without space for detours. But he still had to ask the one question they couldn't edit out. Caspian heart, do you take Serafina Knox? For better or worse, silence. One breath. Two. Then I stepped forward and reached for the microphone. I didn't snatch it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even look at Serafina. I turned toward the crowd and said clearly, before I answer, that there's something you should know. The organ stopped. A few guests shifted in their seats. Someone dropped a program. I continued, steady and unsparing. Last night, while I was supposed to be at the hotel with my best man, my father, Reverend Gideon Hart, was at home. And so was Serafina. I paused just long enough for the weight to settle. They spent the night together. A murmur began, then died. Everyone waited. I raised my hand slightly, cutting the air. I'm not asking you to believe me. I brought receipts, and then calmly, precisely, I laid it out. Motion-activated camera footage showing Serafina entering my father's house close to midnight, leaving just after sunrise. System logs verifying the footage was unaltered. A wine order charged to our shared wedding account signed for by G. Hart. An alternate email account used to access and edit our guest list coordinated by both of them. Threatening messages sent to discredit me in case I spoke up. An effort to paint me as unstable. I paused again, looked toward the front. Some of you might be wondering if this is paranoia. So let me be clear. Paranoia doesn't generate log files, delivery receipts, or video timestamps. This isn't a feeling. It's a fact. I could see the faces shifting, shock, disbelief, horror. But then Serafina did something I didn't expect. She stepped forward and reached for the mic. Caspian. she said softly, tearfully. You're not wrong, but I didn't mean for it to happen. He's a man of faith, of authority. He manipulated me. I didn't know how to stop it. The cathedral gasped collectively. I took a breath, then replied not with anger but with surgical clarity. You didn't know how to stop it, but you knew how to use it. You coordinated email access. You contacted my colleagues to warn them I might be unstable. You tried to rewrite the narrative before I even had a chance to speak. That's not coercion. That's collaboration. My father stood now. This is a private family matter, he said, voice trembling with what he wanted to be righteousness. This isn't the place for spectacle. I turned slowly to him. You used this church, this altar, this entire ceremony as a stage to cover your sins. You made it a matter for the congregation the moment you brought your betrayal into this sanctuary. And then to Pastor Merritt I said I won't be continuing this ceremony. I do not. I will not. I placed the mic gently back on its stand. I'm sorry to bring this into your space, but the deception began here. It ends here too. Without another word, I turned and walked away. Jet met me at the side door, holding it open like we'd practiced. I heard the sound of chaos behind me, chairs shifting, people shouting, camera flashes, cries, but I didn't look back. I stepped into the daylight, into the silence of freedom, and climbed into the waiting car. The moment the door shut, my phone buzzed. One message from Orion. Sent. By the time we pulled onto the freeway, the video had already found its first audience. Naira's footage, raw and steady, was picked up by a local news outlet within an hour, then re-uploaded to social media. It spread like a spark through dry leaves. But it wasn't just the footage. Orion's email, meticulous, time-stamped, unflinching, landed in every inbox tied to the guest list. It wasn't emotional. It was evidentiary. They saw the log files, the receipts, the messages, the quiet, methodical betrayal. By the time I turned off my phone that night, my name was trending, but for once I didn't care. The responses came in waves. The church community split down the middle. Some called for Gideon's removal. Others begged for forgiveness on his behalf, insisting we keep family matters private. The Knox family issued a statement of sympathy for both parties, though their wording danced around any admission of guilt. I kept silent. No interviews, no threads, no emotional essays, just stillness. But silence didn't mean surrender. Within 24 hours, the church board placed my father on temporary leave. But in the same breath, they released a statement, implying that I was under emotional duress. The same tactics still in play. I responded without speaking. I forwarded everything to a lawyer, someone unaffiliated with the church, someone trusted, and to a journalist known for investigating spiritual abuse. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted to remove their power to distort the truth. Then came the Knoxes.